All right, guys, we are live. Hello and welcome. Hey, guys, what's going on? James here. And we're back with another podcast episode. We literally just did one yesterday. We're back today. One of us, there he is, got a haircut. What is going on here? I'm joined today by Billy of Will_Walsh_NFL on YouTube. You guys can go subscribe to him at the top of the description of this live stream. Billy, how you doing today, man? You got a
I
fresh
am,
cut.
yeah, I am doing great. Thank you for, again, that lovely introduction. But James, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, it's James's birthday today.
It is.
We need emojis in the chat, happy birthdays in the chat. Wish this man a very, very happy, happy day.
Well, I
Please.
I appreciate that. It's a fun day. It's an exciting day. And what better way to celebrate than to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Billy? Right? Because there's a lot of fun stuff going on, and we're gonna dive into it a little bit today. This is something that I had talked about in a video already, but I wanted to do a live stream just to dive into it more and really just have some fun with it. So today we're going to be talking about some free agents that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should look to sign to their roster, Billy. And we're just going to kind of go over the names that are on the Bleacher Report article. There is a lot of different types of free agents that are on that list, a lot of different types of teams and whatnot. So, yeah, man, you ready to dive into it?
Ready to go.
All right, real quick before we get into it, let's just go ahead and read the chat real quick. Thank you, everybody, for the birthday messages. Greatly appreciated. If you guys are new, by the way, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the like button, by the way, if you're enjoying this live stream. I'd greatly appreciate that as well. And I know Billy would also appreciate it. So, guys, let's go ahead and dive right into the article. I'm going to pull it to the other screen just so you guys can still see me and Billy talking about this. Actually, before we start, Billy, I have two videos coming out talking about this, but there was a couple of interesting reports from Jeremy Fowler that I want to bring up real quick. Number one is the Bucs apparently Tampa is expected to find a way to re-sign Mike Evans. That was the first thing that Jeremy Fowler had been hearing around the league. The second thing is that apparently Devin White wanted $20 million per season in talks with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Your thoughts on both of those those reports from Jeremy Fowler?
Well, just living in a world where they're both definitively true. The Mike Evans one doesn't surprise me. I think that very slim chance Mike Evans leaves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jason Light's done a lot of good things in his tenure as general manager, also definitely some bad things. But if he were to let Mike Evans slip away, that would be a pretty big black stain on his resume because Mike Evans is definitively the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' best offensive player of all time.
Not even
He's
close.
Yes, he's a fringe Hall of Fame candidate.
I
At
I
the
mean I would say he is a Hall of Fame candidate.
okay, and he is definitely going to get his jersey retired at some point. Name on the stadium.
Yeah.
So I think you can't let that guy leave, especially when that guy is open and willing, wants to stay. Like there's no bad blood, there's no animosity, it's nothing like that. He wants to stay, so why would you not want to keep him? Not to mention, again, he's an older player, but he is still productive.
Yeah, and then the second, I agree 100% by the way with everything you said. I'm not going to really spoil too much of what I said in the video. But I do agree that, yeah, Mike Evans is very good at football, and the man should and will be getting a bag, and it should be from the Bucs. Now, Devin White. Ooh, 20
Yeah,
million per
yeah.
year, Billy. I understand paying the man 15, maybe 16. Maybe you could convince me 17. I don't even know about all that. $20 million? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, hard no.
I wouldn't even think Devin White is 15 is a high number.
It's a high
I mean,
number. It's only four, like 3.3 million more than he's making now.
I don't see I don't see Devin White on an incline. His performance is really plateaued. right? Devin White is not still, even though he's a young player, is not still getting better. And I don't, it might even be on a slight decline. You know, the best Devin White has ever looked was the Bucs playoff run in 2020, right? I would say that those
Fantastic.
he didn't play against Washington, but New Orleans, Green Bay, and then the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. Devin White was out of this world. He looked like the best player on the defense and maybe the best linebacker in the league. Since then, he's never quite recaptured that. And he's been banged up with a couple of injuries. I remember 2021, he had an injury this year, right? He did have the groin injury earlier in the season, but he just has never really gotten back to that. He showed you what he could be, and then he stopped being it. And I just feel like of all the seasons you would expect him to be his best, it'd be this year because he would players generally tend to play their best in contract years. And Devin White is in a contract year. And if you're trying to get $20 million a year, you could be looking at 5 years, $100 million as your contract. If you're trying to get that, what more motivation do you need? You should be playing with your hair on fire, lights out every game. If that's what your goal is to come away at the end of the season with that kind of payday, then you should be bringing it. And I just don't see that's a lot of money to invest in a guy. And I just think it always kind of sticks in my craw that he plays next to a guy who's maybe 8 years older than him. I'm sorry for not knowing the exact math, but he plays next to a guy who's
Eight. I think eight
eight.
is actually pretty much I think that's pretty close.
So he plays next to a guy who's 8 years older than him, and the guy who's 8 years older than him outplays him consistently. That just bothers me a little bit. If you're going to invest that much money in a guy and going to pay, that kind of money to keep a guy around, he should be one of the best, if not the best players on your defense, on your team, really.
I agree. I mean, the way I boil it down is this: you want $20 million per year, you got to be one of the best linebackers in the league.
Yeah.
Devin White's a good linebacker. Is he one of the best in the league? No, not consistently, right? Not consistently. That 2020 season, great year, right? Everybody knows that was a great year. After that, Devin White's been on a bit of a step back. I'm not going to say full on decline because he's still so young, right?
He's up and down, right?
Yeah, he's up and down.
Down player.
That's what it boils down to. And guys like that just don't get it, at least, not typically from their teams get $20 million. Could Devin White go into the open market and get $20 million? I mean, yeah, I would say so. Gosh, could you imagine a Carolina Panthers or another team that is just kind of devoid of defensive talent looking to add a piece like Devin White? Yeah, absolutely. I still think Devin White can be a guy that can be a large piece for a defense, even like a leading guy in a way, right? But that doesn't mean that he's necessarily worth $20 million per year.
I think he has too many holes in his game. While he does bring a lot of good, he brings plenty of bad, and he's had years and years to correct those holes, and he doesn't look like he looks like the same guy. You want to see steady growth and improvement from young players, and I just feel like he hasn't given you that consistent, steady getting better in increments.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. But Billy, with that being said, we talked about two guys who are potentially going to be free agents for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this upcoming season. So let's go ahead and dive into some actual free agents right now, today, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could potentially look to add to their roster. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at what's going on, Billy. Are you, I'm pretty sure you're ready to dive into it now at this point.
I'm ready.
Let me go ahead and see if I can find the Bleacher Report article. I found it. This was written by the Bleacher Report staff, our friends over at Bleacher Report. Yes, Billy, they're your friends too now. And, man, this was a very fun article. It prioritized a lot of the different signings and things that people, had written about. Like, oh, here's some players that the Arizona Cardinals should add. Here's some players that the Atlanta Falcons should add, and all these different types of things. What I think is going to be kind of fun, Billy, it's almost like, it's not even like a word player word association. We're just going to go through each team, see some of the guys that Bleacher Report has recommended for other teams, as well as the Bucs. We'll start off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then talk about it. How's that sound?
It sounds beautiful.
All right, let's go ahead and start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As I covered in my video, Um, Tampa Bay Buccaneers obviously still alive in the NFC South. Billy, the first thing I want to talk about is the biggest weaknesses. Because right now, Bleacher Report has it listed as center, guard, tight end, cornerback, and safety. What are your thoughts on the idea of those pieces being the biggest weaknesses of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? For me personally, interior offensive line, yes, that is the biggest weakness of the Buccaneers right now. Everything else on there, cornerback, safety, tight end, I would argue it's more so of a depth issue rather than pure starting issues, except for maybe like strong safety. That's another one where it's like, okay, yes, they could add a guy to be a starter there. But what are your thoughts?
Yes, obviously the top two, center and guard. I mean, that's a no-brainer. We actually just talked about it in yesterday's stream. Baker Mayfield's, weakness or something that he really struggles with being a smaller quarterback, needing those interior linemen to be able to clear a lane for him to see. So absolutely, center, guard, guard. Yeah, that is the main weakness I think facing the Buccaneers. Something that, assuming something miraculous doesn't happen, they need to address in the offseason. The third one, tight ends. I mean, I kind of like Cade Otton. I think Cade Otton is an underrated player. I'm not saying he's great by any means, but I don't look at him as a weakness at all. I actually think on any given play, he's the third to fourth best option the Buccaneers have if we're talking about who we're going to throw the ball to. He is reliable with his ability to catch. He is always able to do a really good job after he catches the ball. He manages to get a little bit of extra yardage. His it's not like he's a yak machine by any means, but he does catch the ball, fall forward. Catch it at 4 yards, get you 6, or catch it just short of the sticks and fall over the marker to get the first down. And I think that just shows he's got a good feel for the game. I like Cade Otton, so I wouldn't really list that as a weakness. Certainly not like a pressing weakness. Definitely, I don't think worthy of the third largest weakness on the team. Then the other two are really just DBs, right? Cornerback, strong safety. Corner is kind of an alarming one because we have two highly paid cornerbacks. So to see that on the list as a weakness that's not what you want, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you mentioned a depth situation where, you're talking about depth, but I could argue that our cornerbacks have not played up to the standard of their contracts so far this season. It's not been the best showing for guys like Dean and Davis, who we've seen what they can do at different times of their career. They can be better than this, but this year has not been their best showing. Concerning to see that on the list for sure. Strong safety. Yeah, I mean, that's a red flag if there's ever been one. It's not good.
Certainly.
Free safety is beautiful, though.
Fantastic. Going very well. Very well. Well, guys, real quick while we got here, hit the like button, by the way, if you guys are enjoying the stream so far. Now let's go ahead and dive into the player that they feel like they should add now. And Bleacher Report talks about it being Logan Ryan as a guy that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should add now. Obviously, this is somebody the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans are very familiar with, Billy. Logan Ryan has been a guy that's played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers extensively in last year's season, and is a guy that knows Todd Bowles' system and gives versatility to both cornerback and safety. When I had seen this, I thought that is a great idea. Bring him in. Billy, your thoughts on the idea of Logan Ryan being an addition to this Buccaneers secondary?
Yeah, I see no reason. I can't find the negative in it, right? I see no reason why not to bring him in. He's a familiar face. You covered that. Familiar with the system, familiar with the guys in the locker room, the guys in his position group, all that stuff. That's great. Last year, the big knock on Logan Ryan, I guess if you could put it out there, he only played 9 games. So he did, get hurt and he wasn't able to play a full season. But we don't have a full season left in this 2023 year. So yeah, he had a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, an interception against Aaron Rodgers last year, which was a beautiful interception, by the way, a filthy bait over the middle of the field. So yeah, I like the idea of it. I also think something that would be interesting with it is because Logan Ryan is more of a floating. He's not necessarily a strong safety, he's more of a floating kind of safety. But that frees up Antoine Winfield Jr. Because the cool thing about Antoine Winfield Jr. is he's not very one-dimensional. He's a multi-dimensional athlete that you can plug and play in a lot of different situations. And Winfield has always been great around the line of scrimmage. That's not to say he's not great in the deep third or, playing in a deep zone in a cover two, but around the line of scrimmage, Winfield's a great tackler. He's a great blitzer. He is fantastic in the box. And even though he's small for that position, Winfield is more than capable. So if you got a guy like Logan Ryan, it potentially could free up Winfield to move around a little bit and maybe get him a little bit more involved because you can force the issue with him rather than having him wait to make a play because a play comes to him. You can put him in a position where he is where the play is going to be.
Yeah, to get another coverage guy in there, right? A guy that is just reliable in coverage, I think is huge. Like you said, it unlocks more of what you can do with Winfield, I think, right? And give him more versatility, which I feel like is so important. And it just overall, one, you get another veteran in there, right? That is, I'm never gonna think that that's a bad thing. And it does give you more versatility at both corner and safety, and you can do a lot more creative things, right? There was a reason why Todd Bowles had talked about the idea of bringing back Logan Ryan. Just openly saying that earlier in the year. He'd also talked about the idea of Akeem Hicks. Do you want to talk about that real quick? Because there was a report that Akeem Hicks has had some interest from a lot of teams, but he isn't sure if he's going to be playing this season. So I would all be in favor of Akeem Hicks coming back. I think that'd be a very good addition for the second half of the season. Wanted to bring that up here. Your thoughts on Akeem Hicks possibly coming back? Because I feel like, much like in the case of unlocking stuff with Antoine Winfield Jr., I feel like bringing back a guy like Akeem Hicks could unlock a lot of what you could do with Vita Vea. Because one thing I feel like is missing from this Bucs piece right now is another strong defensive tackle, nose tackle, let's call it, to open up what you can do with Big Vita playing him at defensive end. We saw that to great success versus the Tennessee Titans. And it's something that I feel like would help out a lot. So what are your thoughts on Akeem Hicks while we're talking about the possibility of bringing back former Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I was really excited last year when the Bucs signed Akeem Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
I like Akeem Hicks, always have. I liked him when he was in Chicago. I was like, I like this guy. I didn't think that his impact on the team last year was, outstanding. He didn't play a full season, and injuries have been something that have bogged him down. 3 of the last 4 seasons, he hasn't played a full season's worth of games. But I agree with the concept of freeing up Vita. I think Greg Gaines was probably brought in with some of that mentality, and Vita Vea is just. It's amazing because he's kind of your unfortunately for the Bucs, he's kind of your best pass rusher, even though he's also really there to be a run defender. He's just that good. So, you're in a situation where, yeah, you want to find different ways to free him up, but you kind of need him to do what he's there to do. So the concept of getting another guy in there to fill that gap, which is what I think you had a couple years ago with Ndamukong Suh, right? Suh was able to, he's big, strong in the middle, mean, nasty, can handle things and help free Vita up. I just think I would, if I had to pick one, I would pick Logan Ryan's impact over Akeem Hicks's impact. I wouldn't be opposed to either, certainly not. And maybe even having another veteran in the room with Kalijah Kancey, like you just talked about, having a veteran in the room for the DBs, having a veteran in the room with a rookie, always a good idea. And Akeem Hicks and Logan Ryan, both upstanding guys, bringing them in. Nothing wrong with bringing in either. And I don't necessarily see, like, what's the downside? If you're trying to make a push, right, in a weak NFC South, you feel like you have a team, why not? What are you holding back?
No, I agree 100%, man. So now we're going to get into more speculatory things. We don't get to talk about the 2024 free agency because it talks about the idea of adding Shelby Harris, and then the NFL draft talks about adding Zach Frazier from West Virginia. In this one, and that is something we could talk about at a later date, but for today, I just want to keep it purely to guys they could add right now. So you take a look at the previous week's selections for the Bucs here, Billy, and a couple of interesting names on here, right? You have safety Eric Rowe, you have center Aaron Brewer, and you have wide receiver Malik Neighbors. What are your thoughts and opinions on these 3 guys? For me, personally, the most interesting name out of that bunch there was Eric Rowe. It lends more to that Logan Ryan idea where you get safety and cornerback versatility. In the case of Aaron Brewer, I mean, it'd be a backup center, it'd be a veteran center type of move. Malik Neighbors, that one was pretty interesting to me just because I think I would much rather see the Bucs develop Trey Palmer than go out and look to give a guy maybe like wide receiver 3 snaps at this point, right? Because you're already there. You know what I mean? So, what are your thoughts on Eric Rowe, Aaron Brewer, and Malik Neighbors as 3 other guys that Bleacher Report recommended?
Yeah, I think it's too late to get a new center. I think when you're this deep in the season,
Yeah, like
you
it. I
got
agree.
what you're not Robert Hainsey is going to be the center for at least barring injury for at least the rest of this season. Going into next season, that's a totally different discussion, of course. But you're not going to change centers midway through the year. I don't think right. They didn't really necessarily want Robert Hainsey to be their center. Let's not forget Ryan Jensen was supposed to be in that spot. So, you're already playing with a backup essentially as it is. You're not going to bring in another guy and stir the boat. It's just not going to happen. So Robert Hainsey's the center. I mean, adding center depth,
Is
you
it
know,
really going to move the needle?
right.
Is it really going to make an immediate impact on the second half of this season?
I wouldn't think so. I think Robert Hainsey going from, he's already got Ryan Jensen, who is, by all accounts, seems very involved despite not playing, which credit to him. And he played with Tom Brady last year. Now he's playing with Baker Mayfield. I think he's been under proper tutelage. I think you're getting the best you're going to get out of Robert Hainsey. I don't think it's as if, bringing a veteran to help him, some sort of mentorship in that regard. I don't see that being a huge impactful thing because even Matt Filer is a veteran that they brought in who plays guard, but you're talking about, again, in that room, you have veterans. I don't see that as something that, like you said, is going to move the needle. Interesting one, though, that I kind of disagree with you on, wide receiver 3. I'm not anti Trey Palmer by any means, but I do feel like there are plenty of times in a game like this season where Trey Palmer has kind of disappointed. I mean, he's also had a couple moments where he's made great plays, and you're like, this guy, you see kind of the potential. But yeah, I would do like the idea. I think this offense misses Russell Gage. If Russell Gage were healthy, I think the offense would be a little bit more smooth, and I
Such a
think
big,
Baker Mayfield
such a
would
big
be.
what if.
I think Baker Mayfield will be, and the problem with Russell Gage is we don't know because he's almost never played, right? Since he's been a Buck, he can't find the field. But I think that you're missing a guy who's got just consistent reliability. I think Trey Palmer would be an excellent 4 right now. I don't think he's an excellent 3. I think he's an okay 3. And I think too often this season we've seen Mike Evans is just, running deep as a decoy, and Chris Godwin is over here. And the Bucs have struggled to find that other person. And I think Cade Otton has at times been that other person. Rashad White in the receiving game has at times been that other person. But it would be nice to have that guy working the middle of the field opposite, opposite Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I should say. But I'm not sure Malik Neighbors is the guy, but I do like the idea of bringing in a wide receiver 3, just a solid, reliable catcher of the football. Because think about how many times each Sunday, right, we see Devin Tompkins on the field. We see guys on the field who are backups. Jarrett comes on the field a lot for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Devin Tompkins is out there quite a bit for a guy who's really a special teamer, a core special teamer.
Raheem Jarrett, Devin Tompkins has been out there. Palmer gets
Right.
out there a little bit. No, I
And
mean you have basically convinced me at this point.
all right.
So no, I mean yeah, I agree with a lot with what you're saying there. I think the Russell Gage injury was huge.
Yeah.
It is something that they sorely miss, right? I guess also I may have been underestimating a wide receiver's ability to quickly become a number 3 in this offense and learn the offense.
Yeah.
That's a big hurdle. So
Yes.
it would be interesting.
Down the line, Trey Palmer, he shows a lot of potential. He got that deep ball called back last week where he made that twisting, really fantastic body control catch
Hmm.
down the field. Like that shows you what he can be. The touchdown catch against the Saints on the fade. That shows you what he can be. He definitely has ability, but again, he's a rookie, and you're asking him to play pretty big, important moments, minutes in games, and you're relying on him. And he has drops this year, and he has situations where it's like, man, you wish you just had a more solid, a little bit more reliable guy in there to fill that void.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we're gonna be taking a look at some other teams here. Thank you guys, by the way, for all the birthday wishes and the likes on the live stream. If you guys are new here, by the way, go ahead and subscribe and hit the like button if you've enjoyed the live stream so far. Billy, now we're gonna dive into every other team and see if there's some interesting names there. There's a lot of other teams that have a lot of other suggestions. A lot of it is stuff that, is pretty meh in terms of like necessarily being somebody that they should look to add. Um, but we're gonna dive in and see if there's any other interesting names. This is where we really get into like the word, like not essentially like word association, but I give you a player and you go yay or nay, and then we can kind of talk about it more. Okay,
I like it.
let's go ahead and dive right into it. Firstly, the Arizona Cardinals, they had Michael Schofield the third into offensive lineman as their ad now. For me personally, Billy, that's not necessarily somebody that jumps out the page of being somebody they should add. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not gonna act like I'm gonna be honest. The Arizona Cardinals offensive line, I'm not the most knowledgeable about it. Michael Schofield the third, I'm not the most knowledgeable about the man. I think the Cardinals will be moving on from Kyler Murray after this season. I don't think it's ever a bad idea to get yourself two things are at play. I think it's never a bad idea to get yourself a good offensive line. I think the best teams have good offensive lines, and I also think you want to do everything you can to keep Kyler Murray healthy
Well,
for
now
the rest.
Billy. So let me explain this a little bit more. By the way,
Go ahead.
real quick. Also, I wanted to point something out because I just realized that this is what it was talking about. In the case of the previous week's selections, Aaron Brewer is somebody that they should add in 2024 free agency. Malik Neighbors is somebody that they should draft.
Okay.
That was the previous.
Okay.
So okay. The
Appreciate
ad
you.
now was Eric Rowe in the
Appreciate you.
previous week. Um, when we're talking about the guys for like the Arizona Cardinals ad now, are they a fit for the Bucs? Is what I'm looking
Oh,
for.
okay.
So I'm gonna
Oh,
give you guys. I'm gonna give you a name, and then we can talk
I
about whether or
apologize.
not it's a fit for the Bucs. So is Michael Schofield the third a fit for the Bucs?
No.
Okay. And the previous week they had a guy who's probably gonna be coming up a few times. Cornerback Greedy Williams. Bit of an interesting name there, Billy. Young cornerback, formerly with the Cleveland Browns. Somebody who I remember during the NFL draft that a lot of Bucs fans were interested in. What are your thoughts on Greedy Williams? Because it does buy more into that idea of getting some cornerback depth there and young cornerback depth at that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because where the Buccaneers, I mean, the problem is the Buccaneers have good cornerbacks on paper, right? We're paying top cornerback dollar to two good guys. The thing that's interesting about that is he's not going to be a nickel corner. And I think nickel is where the Bucs struggle a lot. We have Christian Izien in there who makes some plays, and I like him because he's scrappy. He kind of reminds me of Antoine Winfield Jr. light. He's small, undersized, good tackler. He finds the football. I like that. But Greedy Williams is not going to be that. He's going to be an outside corner. If you're talking about adding an outside corner, I think then the guy who would be under siege there, right? That's Zion McCollum then, who starts to you're kind of looking at Greedy Williams being that third outside corner who would play in case of injury. So I kind of like it though. I actually kind of like it because I'm not the biggest Zion McCollum fan, so I kind of like that.
I think it'd be interesting. This is where you guys are really going to see just wow. James just wants the Bucs to add every single player, just because that's just how I roll, man. I mean, I didn't say they should add Michael Schofield, so
Yeah, you started out nay.
we're 1-1. So moving on to the Atlanta Falcons now, Billy. They have Melvin Ingram as the option to add now, and then the previous week they had Logan Ryan. We've already talked about Logan Ryan, so what are your thoughts on Melvin Ingram, veteran
Love
pass
it.
rusher, former great,
Love it. Pass rush is lacking. The Bucs have to blitz.
severely.
We just talked about how Vita Vea is kind of the best pass rusher in one-on-one situations for the team, and that is just not what should be happening. Kalijah Kancey has shown up in recent weeks as an explosive player, but that's two interior guys. On the exterior, you really just have Shaq Barrett, and we've talked about this in streams past. Shaq Barrett, he's an older player coming off an Achilles. You're putting a lot on him to expecting him to be able to play like he played in 2019 or even 2020. That's a tough ask. I think Shaq Barrett's played admirably this season for sure, but you're really requesting a lot out of an older player coming off of a catastrophic injury. Anthony Nelson's a good depth piece. Joe Tryon Shoyinka.
Billy, I'm gonna say this. So far, based off of what we've seen this year, the Bucs overpaid Anthony Nelson.
Really?
Five
Shane.
million, 5 million per year, man. When has he showed up this year?
I'm pretty sure he has at least 2 sacks on the season. How many sacks Anthony Nelson have on the season? You're the stat guy. You're gonna find it.
One or
2 sacks,
two? I think it's one or two.
which is not like I. That surprises me. I'm not the biggest Anthony Nelson fan, but I think he
I
doesn't. He plays limited snaps, and I do think he contributes in his time on the field.
I just feel like they've overcommitted to Anthony Nelson now.
I
Whereas
he's our second best edge rusher.
that doesn't mean he's good.
Well, but
He has 2 sacks this year. He had one against
right. I mean,
Minnesota
come on,
and one against Buffalo.
2 sacks in very very limited reps.
But is that guy worth $5 million per year?
I guess I'm just not looking at $5 million as like that extreme a contract.
Like that's money you could give Melvin Ingram.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony Nelson is not. I don't think he's the problem.
Now we've started debating Anthony
Let's just
Nelson.
put it that way. I think Anthony Nelson is fine. I think he's going to finish. I feel like every season, Anthony Nelson has had a pretty. He's the same guy most of the time, and I think he'll be the same guy at the end of this year that he's been at the end of every year. He's just a decent, okay backup edge rusher.
All right, that's fair. We can. I just think he's slightly overpaid. I'd give him like 3 million per year. But now I'm just cutting. Now I'm just pinching pennies
Yeah,
at this
you're
point.
you're such a cheap GM, James. My gosh.
I really am. I really am. Listen, we gotta pay Mike Evans, okay? It's
Yeah, that's
I don't make the rules, but Billy, Melvin Ingram was for the Atlanta Falcons. Logan Ryan was the previous week one, so we already talked about that. Baltimore Ravens. Bryce Callahan at cornerback is their ad now, and then before that was another guy we're going to be talking about a lot, Desmond King. What are your thoughts on both these cornerbacks being potential additions for the Bucs? Both slot guys as well.
yeah. We just talked about cornerback, third string cornerback, right? Christian Izzy, he's a safety. On the depth chart, he's really the backup safety. So you're talking about a guy who's playing out of position. And last year, the Bucs kind of did the same thing, flirting with the idea of putting Antoine Winfield Jr. at the nickel. So it's kind of been an unaddressed, even back, if you take back to 2019, let's not forget Mike Edwards played a lot of nickel for the Bucs in 2019. So that's been something that the Buccaneers, have just kind of, I don't want to say they've just kind of meandered through filling that spot, but like they just don't have that's a crucial part of a defense, and they've kind of neglected it a little bit. So, yeah, I'm not anti adding any cornerback who can potentially step in and fill that role. Let's not forget guys like Ross Cockrell, who are not like big name, exciting people, but Ross Cockrell played a pivotal role for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl run of 2020, kind of in that third string nickel cornerback position.
He's still out there too. Could bring
Might
him.
be a little long in the tooth nowadays, Ross Cockrell. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's got to be. I'm not sure. I won't speculate.
Yeah, no, I agree with you though. Like getting cornerback depth is always going to be good. They do like versatility with their defensive backs, right? And King and Callahan, being pure nickel corners, I feel like is a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because the Bucs would need a pure nickel corner. It's bad because it's not necessarily what the Bucs go for in this defense. So it is interesting. Buffalo Bills. It's Desmond King. We already talked about him. And then before that, it was no one. Apparently, Bleacher Report thought they needed to add no one, Billy. So we're just going to go ahead and move on to the Carolina Panthers. Lael Collins is the first name that comes up for the ad now as the offensive lineman. He's played tackle in the past. And then before that, it was Marquez Callaway as another wide receiver option. What are your thoughts on both these guys? In my opinion, real quick, I like the idea of adding Marquez Callaway. I think that that's a very interesting wide receiver ad that could be very beneficial to the Buccaneers offense. In the case of Lael Collins, it's not a need for a tackle per se on this offense right now. So I would be a yeah, bring him in for Marquez Callaway, a no for Lael Collins, Billy. What are your thoughts and opinions on both those players?
Yeah, I'm going to be in complete agreement with you. I
I
think
thought
the
you were going to
Buccaneers.
say I'm going to be in complete disagreement with you.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think the Buccaneers offensive line, love it or hate it, it is set. It is what it is. The Bucs are not changing it, barring injury. I think Stinney should stay as the starter, though. I don't think that there's any reason to remove him from the lineup. I just think that is the five that you'll see for the rest of the season. Receiver, we just talked about it. I think I'm open to the idea of anybody who's a little bit of a veteran. I know he's only 25, Marcus Callaway. It's not necessarily a veteran, but he is more veteran than Trey Palmer. And I just would like the idea of bring in somebody, see if they could give you a splash. I just think a lot of times when you have the players outside that the Buccaneers have, even though sometimes Godwin is an inside receiver, when you have the top two players that they have, you need a third player to be the guy that you can count on. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a receiver, right? It could be a tight end, it could be a running back, but you just need somebody who's consistently going to be there for the quarterback because the top two guys are going to get a lot of attention, rightfully so.
I would just love the idea because Marquez Callaway, honestly, like kind of a big receiver, 6'2", 204, 25 years old.
4.5 40.
Yeah, like, and he's a guy too who just put up in 2021 698 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns starting in 11 games. Like, that's not a terrible stat line. Like, he's definitely one of those guys where it's like, okay, get a big bodied wide receiver, just another guy, another body out there, a vet like you were talking about. He's got a couple years of experience and still has enough youth to give you something somewhere down the line. Yeah, that's something I think would be a very intriguing addition to this offense for sure, and something the offense is kind of missing for a little bit. Moving on now to the Chicago Bears. This one's going to be interesting. Okay, Billy. So there's two wide receivers. One is Bryan Edwards, and the other is Kenny Galladay. Remember him?
Of course.
What a couple of interesting receivers out there, huh? What are your thoughts on both these guys? I remember when I first looked at the Kenny Galladay one, I was like, should they just try and revive this man's career? But do you think it's too late for Kenny Galladay?
Yes, I would not sign up for the Kenny Galladay experience. It's hard to get out of my mind what he did to the Giants. That bothers me. He was really solid for the Lions, obviously, and then he got paid
He had
and got
2,000-yard years with the Lions.
yes, and then he got paid and got lethargic. I would not want. I just don't think that's not the kind of personnel the Buccaneers need. They don't need that. I think you need. I would rather have somebody who's not been paid yet and is hungry than a guy who's been paid and is just kind of like lingering in the league.
What about Bryan Edwards? What are your thoughts on him? I do tend to agree with you a little bit. Like there is something that's fun where it's like, well, you see the proof. Hey, why not give him a shot? But like typically with situations like that, it doesn't necessarily go well. So, probably not in the wheelhouse. Bryan Edwards, 6'3", 212 pounds, by the way. His birthday was 2 days ago. That's kind of fun. And he's a guy that's been interesting. Still young, 25 years old, I believe. Um, had 571 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns in 2021 for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now a free agent. Thoughts on Bryan Edwards?
Yeah, and you're talking about another guy who's similar to Callaway, right? Bigger body, 4.5 40. I'm not anti it. I don't like the idea of talking about two former Saints receivers in a row like that. I think
Was he
that's
on the
like a bad.
Saints recently?
He was on the Saints, James. I
That's
think that's a
true.
bad vibe for the channel. But
I guess he
yeah,
was
but
on
I'm
the
not.
Saints recently. Oh. Well, No, and one thing that's interesting too is a lot of these receivers that are mentioned just seem like they're all in a similar tier, which is like, meh. Are they just a guy essentially? It is kind of the mindset there. Like a lot of these guys, it feels like it's a giant clump of just like meh receivers.
Clump.
Yeah, so it is an interesting prospect there. But moving on now to the Cincinnati Bengals.
This is a good one.
This one is interesting.
Good one.
And the first name is Myles Gaskin at running back. And then they also have Logan Ryan. We've already talked about Logan Ryan. Myles Gaskin, Billy. This is
Yeah.
an interesting one because it talks about the idea of adding a running back. This is something that personally I have wanted to see them do for a while now. And Myles Gaskin's an interesting running back. He has had some opportunities here and there, especially with Miami in 2020 and 2021. He averaged 4.1 yards per carry in 2020, 3.5 in 2021. After that, man didn't get a lot of playing time. He only played in 4 games in 2022. He's bounced around to a couple of different teams in 2023. He was on Minnesota. He was on the LA Rams. I think he's on Minnesota's practice squad now. What are your thoughts on the idea of Myles Gaskin? Actually, let me check because this one might be even a moot point at this point.
Well, if he's on the practice squad, we could poach him.
He's on the practice squad. He is confirmed on the practice squad because I didn't know if they had promoted him to the active roster or not.
Oh, I
He's on the
gotcha.
practice squad. So thoughts on Myles Gaskin being a guy that
Yeah,
maybe you could poach from the practice squad?
love the idea. Love it. He's only 26 years old, which is young even for a running back. Still in that, in that first window of a prime for a running back. And you talked about it. He's a veteran who's got some production, right? He's got 2, 3 touchdown years where he's had over 500 yards rushing. He's got 700 career receiving yards, showing the versatility. Myles Gaskin is somebody who, again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers backup running backs. It's not a strong point. Okay, I'm not saying Myles Gaskin is, carrying the team at all, and he hasn't played in a little while, but you're talking about comparing him to Keyshawn Vaughn and Sean Tucker. Yes, Myles Gaskin is an upgrade. He's an improvement, definitively. And running back, you could work that guy in quickly. That's a position that you could, I'm not saying you could just, it's easier, you could learn it on the fly, but you could find ways to get him the ball on game day immediately, even though he hasn't been with the team for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I think adding a running back is something that should be a priority. And it's something they just haven't done. Maybe it's something they'll look to do now in the future because, quite frankly, Billy, all their backup running backs haven't really done much besides like a smidge of Chase Edmonds. But Keyshawn Vaughn hasn't done much. They don't want to use Sean Tucker. I mean, that's probably more of an indication than anything that he's
James,
not getting opportunities.
Chase Edmonds drives me crazy because I feel like he spends a lot of time like off balance, stumbling and slipping.
You know
I
who
don't I
used
don't
to
know
do
what
that?
I don't know what it is. What's going on with the man's cleats.
You know who used to do that was Jalen Darden. Remember that when he was a returner?
Yes.
That was a callback. Not a good one, but it was one. Let's
Jalen.
let's move on to the Cleveland Browns. Right now, as it stands, they have Sammy Watkins as their ad now, and they had Traquan Smith as another one. Two more wide receivers, Billy, and they just add them to the clump. Like this is just guys where it's just like, Traquan Smith would be the more interesting guy out of the two, in my opinion, because I feel like Sammy Watkins is very much in that same tier as like Kenny
What?
Galladay, where it's like, okay, the guy's had a couple of good moments, but probably cooked at this point. Thoughts on those two receivers?
Yeah, I got to be so honest. When I saw that the first time I saw it, I did not know Sammy Watkins was still like,
In the league
yeah, I didn't even know he was on the radar of
of
teams.
anybody.
I apologize for being disrespectful to Sammy Watkins. I did not know. Traquan Smith, just another Saints receiver we get to talk about, and I
Another
love.
one. We're at like three at this point, Billy.
I do think Traquan Smith would be the best of the three, though, to add. Out of the three Saints receivers we've discussed, I actually like Traquan Smith the most. He's only 27 years old. He's got 18 career touchdowns, 1,700 career receiving yards, over 100 catches in this league. That's production. And by the way, he's on, and this is something that I think matters, right? It's an underrated thing, but it matters. He's on the Broncos, right? I guess he was on the practice squad or he was on the Broncos. That shows me that Sean Payton left the Saints and took this guy, which there's a reason for that. If for nothing else, Sean Payton likes him in the locker room, likes his veteran status. You wouldn't take a guy that you didn't believe in for some reason, even if on the field his impact is not necessarily seen. Sean Payton invested in him in a second separate location. And that speaks volumes about the man, about the person behind the athlete. So I think that's very credible.
I agree. Somebody said in the chat, by the way, Perrion Winfrey, defense tackle. I love Perrion Winfrey, but I think he has some off the field stuff that's preventing him from, being around a lot of teams. But real quick, we're going to keep on going, though. Dallas Cowboys had no one in this week's Bleacher Report. They had Aviante Collins as the guy before. We're going to kind of skip this one because they don't need to add an offensive tackle, so that's not really a necessity. Moving on to the Denver Broncos, you have Terrell Basham as a guy that is the ad now for the Denver Broncos. And then the previous week, you had Greedy Williams. We've already talked about Greedy Williams. Terrell Basham, another veteran edge rusher, Billy, 29 years old, had 3.5 sacks and 11 quarterback hits last season. This is a guy that would definitely be a rotational guy, but I also feel like you get the same production that you're from Anthony Nelson.
You feel that way? Wow, you were big Anthony. You just downed Anthony Nelson.
I did. 3.5 sacks is what you get from Anthony Nelson. 3.5 to 5.5.
Oh my gosh, you were so down on the man like 10 minutes ago.
I'm not down on Anthony Nelson. I just think he's slightly overpaid.
It's making $5 billion.
It's me being a cheap GM.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, I agree. I don't think it's necessarily to steal your phrase from before anything that moves the needle, but I'm all for adding edge pressure. I think the Bucs need it. They're lacking it. That's the biggest hole in their defense, I think, because it winds up leading to other guys being exposed because they don't get a lot of pressure without blitzing. So yeah, I'm all for adding any sort of edge player.
This to me would be like the equivalent of. I honestly think this guy would be better to bring back. Jannard Avery. You're so blown away by that deep cut. You're like, man, they should add him back.
And maybe Noah Spence too.
Oh, I don't know about all that. Well, let's go ahead and move on forward with the Detroit Lions. Right now, they should add no one, apparently, according to Bleacher Report. Before that, it was, I did not know this guy was a free agent, Billy. Casey Hayward is
Yeah, he's
out there?
older though. He's an older player.
I mean, hey, I'll
I
take,
like
remember whenever Casey Hayward was like hitting different in like the 2010s?
I like Casey Hayward. Fun story, I used to play Madden all the time with my friends, and Casey Hayward was like secretly broken in like Madden 17. He was not like tall or fast, but he just got picks constantly. He had like really high catching. And I just always remember that about Casey Hayward. I like Casey Hayward, but no,
Is he
he's a little bit older,
a
and I
little bit
don't
too
see,
old?
yeah, I don't see him as super impactful.
I tend to agree with that. Casey Hayward's one of those guys that's like way better in name value than, say, actual value, right? But it is fun just to see his name out there being considered for of all teams, the Detroit Lions, right? So that's a fun little name there. The Green Bay Packers are next. Now this is where it gets a little spicy, Billy. I forgot that this guy was in the league, but I remember he did actually some pretty good things for the Raiders back in the day. He's 32 years old. Gabe Jackson at guard is who Bleacher Report feels like the Packers should add. Before that, it was Cameron Dantzler. Now, Cameron Dantzler, we can just kind of chalk up to another cornerback. How many times can you say different things, but or say the same thing in different ways? But now we've got a new challenger has appeared. It's Gabe Jackson, a guard who's had good ability in the past, Billy. This is somebody where I would say, hey, maybe even like a practice squad spot. I don't know what he did last year. While I'm looking that up, give me your thoughts and opinions about Gabe Jackson.
I think we addressed it. I just don't think I don't see any reason to add offensive linemen.
I will say that would be purely an ad. What did he do last year? He was with the Seattle Seahawks the past 2 years. Gabe Jackson's a guy that I would say to add. He started 130 games in the NFL.
Oh yeah,
That is
definitely.
that is good. For me, it's almost like an injury insurance, you know?
But to me,
It's
I
not
like
going to move the needle. Gabe Jackson
I,
is not going to start for you this year.
I like Nick Leverett. I feel like the injury insurance is already on roster. Nick Leverett's proven he's
That's
played
true.
for the Bucs before and he's been reliable. So I don't think that you need to go out and get a guy to learn the offense and get comfortable. Even no disrespect to Gabe Jackson, I think the offensive line is, again, for better or worse, it is what it is. That's the group.
It's fair. That's fair. I would say I would agree with that with the starting offensive line. This would be one of those guys who'd be like, hey, give him a practice squad spot. Just see what he can do. So we are going to disagree a little bit on that, but it's okay. Let's go to the next one. The Cameron Dantzler, by the way. I mean, we don't really have much to say about Cameron Dantzler. It's another corner, but, hey.
Only 25 years old.
Yeah.
Again, young cornerback. I believe he's on the Saints right now on the practice squad, which is great. We just keep bringing up the Whodats. I love it.
Yeah. Houston Texans, right now, they should add Marquez Callaway. Apparently, we've already talked about that. And then the guy before, I'm also kind of surprised this guy's a free agent right now.
Yeah.
Definitely to kind of your points. Ben Jones, the center, is the previous name there. I remember Ben Jones was a really solid starting center for the Titans a time or two ago. And if this was at like the start of the year, I would say yes. And I'm personally never going to turn down the idea of turning down veteran offensive linemen who have had good moments in the past. But again, it goes back to your original point, Billy. Starting offensive line set, man.
Yeah, I kind of think so. One thing that you did scroll past is the 2024 free agency outlook and who
I
are the
did see
10.
Devin White was on there. So
I just saw it and I was like, oh, we
yeah,
gotta bring
Devin
it.
White is the 2024 free agent addition for the Houston Texans. Him and D'Amico Ryans would, I think
That'd be
they'd
great.
that'd be a great combo. It
Yes, that would
really
be
would.
great for Devin White, honestly.
Indianapolis Colts. Philip Dorsett is the wide receiver as the ad now, bringing him back, I guess. And then Sidney Jones the fourth. So another receiver, another corner. Billy, I used to like Philip Dorsett. I thought he used to be a pretty decent wide receiver back in the day. I think he's a little bit too old now. Sidney Jones, I definitely like in terms of corner and just overall safety versatility. I think is something that makes him an appealing defensive back. He is 27 years old right now as it stands, so he's still young enough in my opinion. Definitely a guy that could be an interesting type of addition. He is currently on the Cincinnati Bengals practice squad, and he has started a good bit of games in the past. Former Super Bowl champion, has 4 total interceptions on his career. Out of those two guys, I feel like Sidney Jones would be a more interesting name than Philip Dorsett. Nothing against Philip Dorsett, but that's kind of how I feel. Your thoughts?
I'm not. Philip Dorsett reminds me of someone who I'm going to mention at the end if they're not on this list anywhere that I think the Buccaneers should consider bringing in. Very in the same
Mold.
my audience. Yeah, mold. Yeah, let's go with mold. In the same mold as someone I'm thinking of. And I'm just sitting on the name. I wrote it down on my pad.
All right. All right. We'll keep on diving into it. Let's take a look next at we just did the Indianapolis Colts. I think we're to the Jacksonville Jaguars now. We're going to be going through these a little bit quicker. Greedy Williams, we've already talked about him. Casey Hayward, we've already talked about him. So just going on to the Kansas City Chiefs, Bryce Callahan, we've already talked about him. Keep on going down. Marquez Callaway, we've already talked about him. This is where you start to see some of these names repeat, right, Billy?
Yeah. And because it's the middle of the year, the free agency pool it's in the shallow end right now. It's not deep.
Yeah, go to is it the Cleveland Browns? No, it's the Las Vegas Raiders. We already talked about Melvin Ingram, which is one of the names on there. Billy, I'm just going to call this guy Tommy T, defensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns, because I don't know how to say his last name. So Tommy T, defensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns. This one's interesting to me because first off, extremely young, right? The second thing is guy's a nose tackle. Interesting. 6'2", 296 pounds. We've talked about adding defensive line depth for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a little bit here in this show already. Tommy T, former 4th-round draft pick, went to Ohio State, which would be interesting because the Bucs have like barely ever had an Ohio State player ever on their team. I don't think they've had an Ohio State player on their team since like 2013 or something. So interesting name here. Your thoughts on Tommy T?
Yeah, Tommy T. For anyone who doesn't know who Tommy T is, I believe his name is Tommy Tagai, but it's Togiai. If anybody wanted to look that up, Tommy T, as we're calling him, apparently. I'm for it. I just don't know that he's anything more than Greg Gaines is bringing to the team. But I like the idea, of course, like we discussed before, of freeing up Vita Vea to be the playmaker that he's capable of being.
For sure. Keep on going down the list here. Los Angeles Chargers are up, and apparently they should add Amani Oruwariye. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Amani Oruwariye. That's close enough. That was a good go. And then beneath that, you have got Jarvis Landry as a guy. Jarvis Landry would be so fun in this offense,
Maybe we
man.
should just call him Amani O.
Amani O. Hey, you know what? Don't you start with me.
I,
But
I did Jarvis Landry, James, another Saints receiver, but
this is awful.
yes, Jarvis Landry actually is kind of in the same style as Russell Gage. I like that idea a lot. I know he's older now, but just a guy that can catch the football consistently. You don't need somebody who is going to be incredibly dynamic, but it's nice to have somebody who's reliable. And I think Trey Palmer has the ability to be dynamic. Devin Tompkins, just here and there in spot duty, he gets some end arounds. He's capable of, he can make some plays. I just think reliability is crucial. But James,
I mean, 5-time Pro Bowler. Remember that one year he just went crazy? The couple years he went crazy.
of
Had a hundred,
course.
had 166 targets. had 161 targets. He's had multiple 1,000-yard receiving years. He was with New Orleans last year. Only started 3 games, played in 9. He's a guy. He's Mike Evans is older than him, by the way. Which is
Really doesn't feel it. Wow.
which
Yeah.
goes to show the absolute consistency of Mike Evans. But also, I feel like it's important to note that Baker and Landry were good until that whole Odell Beckham Jr. incident happened. That's a good point, actually.
What was that between?
Baker and Landry.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, obviously I don't follow the Browns well enough to know the full inside of that situation. I know that Odell and Baker fell out, and you would assume that Jarvis Landry would take sides with Odell, his college friend, over Baker. But yeah, Baker had good chemistry with Jarvis for a little while there in Cleveland. I don't know
Yeah,
how that has potentially festered or resolved since then.
yeah,
But
does
yeah,
does
that's an
does
point.
make the waters a little bit murkier. Lyle Collins is for the LA Rams, and then before that, it was Marcus Cannon. Don't really got to talk about either of those guys because they're both offensive tackles. We've talked about that already. You go to the Miami Dolphins, Andrew Norwell. We've already talked about the idea of offensive linemen. Andrew Norwell used to be really good. Personally, I think he's probably cooked at this point, Billy. He's 32. He hasn't played this season. He started 16 games last year. Meh. Tom Compton, similar situation. The versatility certainly helps because he's listed as a guard tackle here for Bleacher Report. But again, it seems like this offensive line, both starting and depth, seems to be relatively set. Go on to the Minnesota Vikings. Do you remember they have the guy on here? He's Duke Johnson is the guy. And then Nick Foles is also the previous week selection. We don't got to talk about Nick Foles. They're not adding a quarterback, right? But Duke Johnson, what a fun name that I haven't heard in a minute, Billy. Remember whenever it was like a couple off seasons ago and everybody wanted the Bucs to add Duke Johnson? They didn't
Of
do
course.
it. And he ended up signing with the Houston Texans, I think, for like pretty big money. They could bring him back. It's very similar to like a Miles Gaskin-esque thing.
Yeah, I'm all for Duke Johnson. Last year, not the best statistics, but going back 2 years, 2021, 4.6 yards per carry, 10.3 yards per reception. He's got 2,800 receiving yards, 400 catches in his career. I like versatility out of my running backs. I think it's important. You need somebody. I know Rashad White is already that versatile back, but it's just nice to have somebody that you could check it down to and they can make a play for you in space. And I think, come on, we saw it with Tom Brady for years and years before he got to Tampa. Then when he did get to Tampa, it's nice to have a running back who can catch the football for you out of the backfield and become a mismatch with linebackers. If you don't have that third receiving option being a receiver, you don't have it in the receiving room, it's nice to have it out of the backfield. And Rashad White right now is the only person on Tampa who really brings that. I don't see beyond him on the depth chart anybody who I feel confident that they're going to scheme open in a passing situation and rely on them to make a play. Duke Johnson kind of has made a career of that. He actually has more receiving yards than rushing yards in his NFL career. So that kind of speaks to some of that versatility, also more receiving touchdowns. So he's going to be that kind of back. I like the idea of bringing in that kind of runner.
Man's literally a receiver. Good
Yeah,
lord. I
yeah.
mean, hey, why not? If it works, right? New England Patriots are up next on our list. Oh god, they should add a lot of. This one was so sad because it said Isaiah Prince. It's like of all the offensive linemen you could add, you picked Isaiah Prince. Like that just sounds sad to me. Nothing against Isaiah Prince, but my man, it's tough, right?
Isaiah getting the Anthony Nelson treatment right now for MrBucsNation.
Well, and then the one before, and then the other one before that was KJ Hamler. I like KJ Hamler. He's a guy that's had a lot of injury issues, Billy, but he is a pretty fast wide receiver. What are your thoughts on him?
I got a fast wide receiver locked and loaded for when we are through this list.
All right.
Locked, loaded, James.
All right. Well, I'm a fan of KJ Hamler, but it does add him to the pile, right? Of insert wide receiver here. Why not, right? Now we get to the New Orleans Saints. Desmond King, we've already talked about him. Apparently, the 2024 free agency, they should add Donovan Smith to Kansas City. Could you imagine? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. Could you imagine?
I really can, James.
That'd be wild. And then before that, they had tight end Dan Arnold. Not going to spend too much time on Dan Arnold. It'd be a good backup tight end for sure, but not necessarily somebody that I would see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being too interested in. And then obviously we've talked a little bit about Desmond King already. The New York Giants are up. You have cornerback Greedy Williams. We've already mentioned him. Before that, it was quarterback Colt McCoy. I agree with that. I feel like the freaking Giants should add every quarterback under the sun, but didn't happen yet, and it is what it is. But the Bucs aren't adding a quarterback. The New York Jets, La'el Collins, yeah, their number one needs quarterback. Just list every quarterback on here because they're all better than Zach Wilson. But La'el Collins is here. Before that, they had brought up Matt Ioannidis, which I remember Matt Ioannidis being a very interesting defensive lineman, Billy. Again, adds to that idea of getting a legitimate guy in there. I kind of put him up there with maybe a guy like Akeem Hicks, who's like, yeah, that'd be a solid vet to add that could give you some actual. Matt Ioannidis is a guy that I feel like can move the needle a little bit.
Move the needle. I don't know.
Plus, he's got a great last name.
He's got. I mean, that's no denying that. I would rather have Akeem Hicks though. I'd rather bring back Akeem Hicks if I had to pick between the two. I like the idea of the guy stepping in where he knows the defense, knows the locker room, has a feel for the situation, and I would feel more confident in Akeem Hicks.
That's fair. We're going to round off this list here. Dan Arnold is in there. We talked about him briefly. Bryce Callahan, we've talked about him. Pittsburgh Steelers, Blake Martinez, meh. They're not going to add a linebacker, so that's something we don't necessarily need to dive into. Anthony Barr, he's not even available now because he's on the Vikings. San Francisco 49ers don't need to add anybody, apparently. And last week it was Michael Schofield. We already talked about that. Seattle Seahawks need to add nobody, apparently, this week. And last week,
all these teams don't need to add anybody.
Yeah, apparently. And then linebacker was Azeez Al-Shaair, who I think is on the Titans now. I'm pretty sure he was. Because I remember that him and Mike Evans had a moment that was talked about. So I don't.
Tampa Bay's not looking to add a linebacker until the offseason. Right. Then they need one because they're going to lose one.
Tennessee Titans. This one's. I remember I read this. And I was like, no, I forgot this guy was, here. Trey Flowers is a guy that's out there. And then you also have Sammy Watkins. We've already talked about Sammy Watkins. Billy, do you have any thoughts on Trey Flowers?
Yeah, edge. Bring him in.
any edge defender. At least give him a workout, guys.
Yes. We're talking about a veteran edge player, and he used to be. It's not that long ago. It's a little while ago that he was productive. You're talking I think 4 years ago, but 3 years ago since he's been But still, what kind of juice do you have? Bring him in, because I like Anthony Nelson a little bit, but apparently you think he's overpaid. Slightly. You got to get somebody who can get some pass rush because can't blitz every play, and without the blitz, it's just lacking.
And then to round off this list, you have the Washington Commanders. You have Wyatt Ray, which I read this wrong the first time. I thought it was Shane Ray, and it was a typo. But I don't think it's Shane. It's not Shane Ray. It's Wyatt Ray, and then Andrew Norwell at guard. So, Billy, a lot of similar names here. A lot of guys that we've really dived into. What is that wide receiver you have in your mind?
I can't believe he's not on this list, and maybe I'm missing something. I feel silly. Am I missing it? Am I wrong? Let me just look at this up.
You're looking it up to see if he's even available. What if he's not?
Right? Am I missing it? Maybe I'm off. I believe that it's possible. All right. I'm gonna just. I guess I'll bust it out. He seems. I'm gonna bust it out. I think the Buccaneers should invest in the concept of Brashad Perriman again.
Oh, love Brashad Perriman.
Listen. Now I had spent a lot of time. Here's my theory, right? I spent a lot of time talking about the third receiver should be somebody who's really reliable, and Perriman has some drops. That could be a clear issue with Perriman. But what's cool about Perriman is he's a vertical threat, definitively. He's big, tall, fast. So if you go that route, right, you need one guy who can work the middle of the field and make plays and be consistent and reliable, and you need other people who can stretch the field vertically. Right now, the Buccaneers have one guy who can consistently stretch the field vertically. Of course, that's Mike Evans. Great. That's awesome. They don't have anybody else who can really stretch the field vertically, and they also don't have anybody else who can consistently get open over the middle and make tough catches. If you add Brashad Perriman, he becomes, even though he's down the depth chart, not a starter, he becomes the other piece to vertically push. The defense can kind of give you some room. And then you can have Godwin do what Godwin does and feast over the middle of the field with consistent paper cuts, to call him something. He gives paper cut catches. 3rd and 10 over the middle. 3rd and 6 over the middle. Screen passes. You can work Godwin underneath and out of the slot. and Perriman can stretch the field vertically. I also like the idea. I think Baker Mayfield, like Brashad Perriman, obviously is not like the best tracker of the football. I still remember there was a game, Thursday Night Football, Carolina Panthers with 2019 against the Bucs, and the ball went through his hands right here on a dropped touchdown and actually didn't touch either of his hands. It was just wide open and it went through his hands. So that shows me he's not the best like tracker of the ball, but Baker Mayfield throws a pretty pass, good spiral, it gets good height. That's an easier kind of ball to catch. So I don't, we're nitpicking and we're splitting hairs, but that's an easier ball to catch and something that I think Perriman might really fit in. And again, he doesn't know the system, but he does know the locker room, knows the organization, and I think that brings value.
Billy, we're gonna go ahead and end off with this. I'm actually happy we get to talk about this because
Okay.
the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did not get running back Michael Carter. He was claimed by the Arizona Cardinals, who had priority. However, according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers put in a claim on Michael Carter, as did the Washington Commanders. But Tampa Bay would have gotten him, but Arizona had priority. First off, that is extremely unfortunate and very sad that Tampa Bay could not get the running back of Michael Carter because he's a very good running back. But that does show that they at least tried, man.
Yes.
They at least tried to get
Yes.
Michael Carter. That's interesting to me because that showcases that the Bucs might be looking to add a running back. What are your
Yes.
thoughts and opinions on the Buccaneers making an attempt to claim Michael Carter? Obviously, it's unfortunate they could not get him, but shout out to the Arizona Cardinals. They got a good running back. They need running back depth also. So that's good for the Arizona Cardinals. But whoa, hold on. Tampa Bay Buccaneers trying to add a running back out of nowhere? That's kind of interesting. Like, kind of something I wasn't expecting them to actually put a claim in on. But it might be a little bit telling as to how they view their running back depth right now. Wouldn't you agree, Billy?
100%. Actions speak louder than words. And Dave Canales is always hyped up like Keyshawn Vaughn and everything like that. He's a very optimistic kind of guy. But that shows you that they know. They recognize it as a potential flaw, as a hole in their offense and in their team, and something that they want to correct and address moving forward. And you love to see it because at least they're aware. You could be in denial about something. You say, "Wow, we're going to get it going." Well, Chase Edmonds missed a bunch of games, but now he's back. We're going to hit the ground running. It's like, no, address it if you can, and they tried to. It's unfortunate, like you said. I mean, the waiver wire order is the waiver wire order. Anyone who's played fantasy football, you can very much relate to that. It's just luck of the draw. It's just how it goes. But yeah, actions speak louder than words, and the fact that they did put in the waiver wire claim shows you that they know and they're willing to address and understand that. Yeah, Sean Tucker, Keyshawn Vaughn, Chase Edmonds. It's not been a banner year.
I would say obviously Chase Edmonds isn't going to be going anywhere, but I would say that this certainly puts guys like Keyshawn Vaughn and Sean Tucker on the hot seat. They've been rotating those two going inactive on a weekly basis, right? And obviously that's unfortunate. Those guys do want to see some time and play some football for sure. But we've talked about these guys, all the different types of running backs that are out there. Myles Gaskin is out there. Could they maybe make an addition for him? And all the other different types of say again.
Duke Johnson.
Duke Johnson is out there, right? The Buccaneers are doing their homework on some of these running backs. Obviously, Michael Carter is a young, recent running back, and so is like a guy like Myles Gaskin. But the Bucs are doing their homework. They're kind of exploring the idea of adding a running back. They have Patrick Laird on the practice squad. I don't necessarily think Patrick Laird is going to be a guy that they're going to be adding in the near future. Nothing against Patrick Laird, but I think Michael Carter might be a bit of a better running back than Patrick Laird, in my opinion. Possibly, right? Possibly. But it is interesting to see the Bucs doing their homework on that, Billy. Is that, in my opinion, that to me shows like, hey, they might make a move here soon. What do you think about the possibility of something like that?
I think it shows they're willing to make a move. I don't think they'll make one just to make one, but if the opportunity presents itself, obviously they're willing to
To
go
get an
for
upgrade.
it. Right. And I think that's all you can ask for. Okay. There's so many teams that sit stagnant and refuse to do things because they're stubborn. That's frustrating. That's annoying, right? When you see a problem, the best thing you can do is try and fix it. Sometimes the fix isn't always there. It's not available. It's not an option. But if it is, do your best to try and fix it. That's all you can ask for. So
I agree, man. It's going to be interesting to see. It obviously depends on who is also available on the market, because like if the Bucs wanted to make a move, they could have added Myles Gaskin by now, right? They could have added some of those other running backs that are available on practice squads, or Duke Johnson, who's just a straight up free agent right now, or any of those running backs that become available, right? The Bucs could do something like that. Maybe now they're just starting to change their mind because they've been rotating, inactives on Keyshawn Vaughn and on Sean Tucker and whatnot. Maybe they feel like, okay, we love Rashad White, sorry. We like Chase Edmonds, but we want another guy in there just in case. So it's an
Let me,
interesting,
can
yeah,
I throw a name out to the chat and kind of I want to get a feel for what you think and what the chat thinks?
yeah.
What about our dear friend, Ronald Jones?
I brought this up a couple weeks ago. Bring him back. Get the reunion going. That'd be a
And
fun one. I mean, Jason
yeah,
Light has had a history with him. I would be down for it. We'll see if it happens, but
I know
but
Ronald Jones. I know he's very one-dimensional, right? And you and I both have been
you
talking
don't
about
need
having.
him to be a receiver.
Well, I was going to say you and I have both been talking about how nice it is to have a two-dimensional or multi-dimensional back, and he's the opposite. But
You got Rashad White for that.
is he more effective than Keyshawn Vaughn? That becomes the question. And he quite literally was the starter over Keyshawn Vaughn. They were both on the same team together, and Keyshawn Vaughn was his backup. So, yeah, I'm going to lean towards he's probably more effective. And I'm also a little biased because scrolling on Twitter today, I saw somebody retweeted his 98-yard run against Carolina, and I was like, oh, man, that was that was a play.
What the
So,
good old days.
and again, explosion in your offense. It's nice to have is there any scenario where you can see a Buccaneers running back not named Rashad White breaking off a long run? Not even 98 yards. Let's just say 30,
Let's just
right?
say 20. How
So
about 10?
it's
I'll
nice to
get I raise you 5. Can anybody get a 5-yard run?
it's nice to have some explosion, even if again it's one dimensional. It's nice to just have somebody who's capable of bursting on and making an impact.
No, I agree 100% with that, man. I think it's an interesting name. And I think now you're seeing that willingness to at least consider a move, right? If the right guy is out there. Obviously, I think Dave Canales would have a big say in that. Jason Light would also have a say in that as well. He drafted Ronald Jones, and that matters. So I don't know, man. I don't know. It'd have to be a guy who's a fit for the offense, and we'll see if anybody else like that becomes available. But it looks like right now the Bucs are at least willing to try. So it's certainly interesting. But with that being said, Billy, we've been going for a little bit over an hour now. We've had a lot of fun today, haven't we? We've had some
Absolutely.
fun times.
Yes.
And what a fun way to celebrate the birthday, man. I've enjoyed it. I've had a fun time, Billy. And I think it's time to wrap it up because I've also got to go get dinner soon.
We got to celebrate the birthday.
Yeah, we got to go celebrate the birthday. So, Billy, before we go
Ooh,
ahead and head out, do you have any final words for the lovely folks who've been watching us for a little bit over an hour now?
thank you. Thanks for the super chats. We appreciate it, of course. That's super amazing. Thanks for any just commentary. Thanks for just subscribes, likes, anything. Of course, it's just fun to hang out and talk football, talk Bucks with you, James, and then with the chat as well. So just thanks. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. It's greatly appreciated. Me and Billy will be back soon. Gosh, at this rate, it could be tomorrow. Who knows, right? We've been having a lot of fun doing these, recording these.
Absolutely.
As long as we keep on thinking up of topics, we're gonna keep on doing these. So it's been a great time. But guys, let us know your thoughts and opinions about all of this down in the comment section below or in the chat. Thank you to everybody in the chat for the birthday wishes as well. I greatly appreciate that. It's been a great time. And as always, guys, we will see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now. See you soon, and go Bucs.